I don't know if they were in their suits. I don't know if they're on board or made it in the water. We just don't know.
A frantic message cuts through the static on the Summer Bay's radio in the rough and wild waters 317 miles southeast of St. Paul Island.
Gotta clear this point, boys.
On the edge of diaster, the crew begs for permission to dock as a fierce storm rages around them. The harbormaster, standing firm against the storm, tries to reassure them of safety, but the sea is unpredictable. With every passing minute, the storm grows stronger, threatening their only hope of safety. Will the sea take the Summer Bay today? Captain Bill's battle against the unrelenting storm rages as nature's fury threatens to overpower their last hope of survival. King Crab Chaos. Back on the tempestuous sea, the dialogue crackles with urgency as the Summer Bay's crew navigates treacherous waters. As they near the harbor, the escalating storm threatens more than just their cargo. It jeopardizes lives. The harbormaster, while hopeful, underestimates the storm's escalating menace as he coordinates the docking efforts. Each swell brings the ship closer to catastrophe, and each gust of wind howls like a premonition of doom. The rogue wave looms as the ultimate test of the Summer Bay's endurance, challenging the crew to muster their full strength against the merciless sea. The crew of the Summer Bay was eager to unload their heavy catch of king crab and finish what had been a difficult season. Captain Wild Bill, a veteran known for his never-give-up attitude, steered the ship toward one of the few canneries still open. The sea grew rougher with each passing minute. Fierce winds and towering waves turned the waters into a chaotic mix of swirling foam and crashing waves. As the Summer Bay drew closer to the harbor, a notoriously dangerous passage, the situation became more alarming. Huge waves crashed in front of them, and when Captain Bill looked back, all he could see were turbulent masses of green and white water, a sight that could unsettle even the most experienced sailor. The radio crackled again with urgency. The harbormaster warned them about the big waves on their approach, urging them to be careful but to keep moving forward. Captain Bill's determination was evident as he decided to push through the challenging conditions, feeling more motivated than ever to finish the season strong. With a firm resolve, Captain Bill informed his crew they would have to brace themselves to navigate through one more set of massive waves before making the final approach. The crew tensed, their eyes fixed on the turbulent waters ahead that seemed ready to swallow them whole. But this wasn't even the worst part. As they approached the harbor, the waves grew even larger, like towering walls of water. Captain Bill, drawing on his years of experience navigating dangerous seas, carefully timed their approach. He planned to catch a massive wave just right, using its momentum to guide them through the narrow harbor entrance. It was a risky strategy. Ride the wave perfectly, let it break at the harbor's edge, and use its force to push the ship forward. The tension on board was intense. Captain Bill shouted for everyone to get ready and move quickly, the roar of the sea and wind almost drowning his voice. The crew rushed to secure themselves and the crab pots, knowing that their survival depended on their timing and teamwork. Then a giant wave rose up over the Summer Bay, casting a dark shadow on the deck. One of the deckhands yelled a warning as the wave crashed down with tremendous force, shaking the ship violently. Water flooded over the deck, and for a moment it felt like the sea might claim the sturdy crab fishing boat for itself. Yet the real struggle was far from over. Captain Bill fought hard to steer the ship, using every bit of his strength and skill against the power of the sea. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours as the Summer Bay faced one wave after another, inching its way closer to the safety of the harbor. The crew needed to get past the rough water quickly. After several tense minutes, Captain Bill felt the sea's fury ease up a bit. He called out, saying they might have passed the worst of it, and asked if everyone was still on board. Voices from different parts of the deck responded, confirming that amazingly everyone was still there. Though there was a sense of relief the danger wasn't entirely gone, the ship was beaten up, the crew was soaked and shivering from the cold, and the adrenaline still pumping through their veins. The first mate did a quick check and confirmed that everyone was accounted for and the ship was still in one piece. He reminded everyone to stay alert because they were not safe yet. Captain Bill felt a mix of relief and lingering fear, but he was glad everyone was okay. Surviving the first part of the storm gave him hope, but he knew they weren't out of danger yet. He praised the crew's courage and the helmsman's skill in keeping the ship steady. The helmsman admitted that steering through the second, much larger wave was terrifying, and there was a moment when he doubted they would make it through. The crew listened quietly, each remembering the moments when they thought the worst might happen. Captain Bill talked about how his trust in their vessel had grown. He recalled how it stayed strong even when the waves were so high they covered the windows. The crew, still catching their breath, found some humor in the situation, joking about how rough the day had been. So rough that there was water on the ceiling inside the ship. But this wasn't the end of their troubles. As the weather began to calm down a bit, Captain Bill decided it would be best to wait until the storm had completely cleared before heading back to port. He knew that safety had to come first, even if it meant delaying their return. The crew began to tidy up the deck, securing equipment and getting ready to offload their catch once they reached the harbor. They were determined to end the season on a strong note, no matter how tough things had been. Reflecting on the rough season, Captain Bill guessed that these events would be talked about for years to come. With a wry smile, he joked that after a day like this, maybe he should have chosen a different job, like becoming a cowboy. This lighthearted comment brought a bit of laughter from the tired but relieved crew. But they knew the challenges weren't over yet. As the storm finally began to die down and the summer bay moved into calmer waters, the crew felt closer than ever. As the summer bay aimed for the harbor, Captain Jake on the Saga was getting ready for a tough day out at sea. The Saga's do-or-die mission. Out in the wide ocean aboard the Saga, Captain Jake Anderson was in a tough spot. The Saga, a strong and dependable fishing boat, was under a lot of pressure to catch a large amount of black cod. This wasn't just any fishing trip, it was a crucial one. If Captain Jake didn't catch enough fish, he could lose his boat. It was a true test of their skill and determination. The day began with Captain Jake figuring out the last few places where they might find black cod, a fish that is highly valued for its flavor and price. These fish were clever and seemed to hide in the deepest and hardest to reach parts of the ocean. The crew found a few good spots, but getting there was another story. As they approached these areas, the excitement and tension grew. They were close, but the vast ocean reminded them that nothing was certain. But this wasn't the hardest part yet. It was the final day of the season, and the last hour to meet their quota was quickly approaching. The black cod they were after could bring in a huge payday, possibly around $2.7 million if the market stayed strong. This wasn't just about catching fish, it was like a high-stakes game on the unpredictable sea. With their eyes set on catching 100,000 pounds of black cod, the challenges kept piling up. Captain Jake had to stay focused, make sure the fishing equipment was working well, and avoid any problems that could ruin the whole operation. To make things even more difficult, they were fishing near busy shipping lanes. Huge container ships traveled through this area, and these massive vessels could easily damage their fishing gear without even noticing. The crew had to be constantly alert, always dodging these giants and trying not to get caught in their path. At one point, a big freighter, the APL Turkey, was heading straight for their fishing gear. Captain Jake tried to radio the ship to warn them about the collision, but no one answered. The freighter kept moving, unaware or unconcerned about the small fishing boat in its way. The Saga's crew could only watch as the massive ship cut through their lines and scattered the buoys that marked their fishing spots. This was a huge setback. The bright red buoys, easy to see in the water, were now gone, pulled under by the freighter. Without these markers, Captain Jake and his crew were lost, not knowing where their gear was. Losing a single pot was bad, but losing an entire string could ruin their season. This kind of loss didn't just mean time wasted, it could also mean financial disaster if they couldn't deliver their catch on time. But even this wasn't the end of their troubles. With their gear cut and their catch at risk, Captain Jake quickly decided to try to save what they could. He set up a heavy-duty hook weighing about 150 pounds designed to pull up the lost pots from the deep waters about 1,600 feet below. This wasn't just about saving the equipment, it was about saving his boat and his future in fishing. The stakes were incredibly high. If they couldn't recover these pots, they would lose the season's profits and the future of the Saga would be in serious trouble. The operation began with Captain Jake giving instructions to the crew to attach a shackle to the end of their lost gear. With the Saga moving at about 2 miles an hour, Jake figured it would take them around 30 minutes to reach the end of the line, if everything went as planned. But if things didn't go well, they'd have to start all over again, which could mean losing precious time they didn't have. The sea was rough, making this job even more dangerous. Jake would usually avoid trying something this risky in such bad weather, but they were out of bait, out of pots, out of money, and out of time. There was no choice but to go ahead with the plan, hoping for the best. Jake reminded his crew that safety had to come first. He made it very clear that if things got too dangerous, they should cut the lines immediately without waiting for him to tell them. The crew nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. With everything ready, the crew released the line into the choppy waters, hoping luck would be on their side. They needed to find and retrieve their pots if they wanted to save their catch and their season. As the Saga drifted along the buoy line, Jake carefully steered the ship to stay right over it. This was crucial to make sure the grapple they had lowered would hook onto the lost gear. But this wasn't the worst part. The real challenge began as Jake closely watched the drift indicators, looking for any sign that the grapple had caught something below. A slight change in the boat's movement could mean they had hooked something important. After a tense wait, the boat's movement began to slow down. This was the moment they were waiting for. It might mean they had caught something on the line. The crew quickly began pulling on the line, feeling a strong resistance that suggested they might have found the lost string of pots. Jake felt a surge of hope and told the crew to keep pulling. The resistance on the line was a good sign. It meant they were not just pulling up an empty grapple, but might actually have a hold of their lost pots. The line started to come up slowly, and on their very first try, they managed to hook the string, a rare stroke of luck in such difficult conditions. The crew quickly began hauling up the pots, and as each one came to the surface, their tension turned into excitement. Not only had they found their gear, but the pots were full of valuable crabs. The crew counted 250 crabs, a great haul that could change their season for the better. Relief and happiness spread among the crew. This catch was a huge boost, not just in money, but also in lifting their spirits. But this wasn't the end of their challenges. This successful recovery was about more than just getting back their lost gear. It showed how strong and determined the crew was under pressure. As they prepared to unload their catch, Jake knew they still had work to do to finish the season on a high note, but for now, they could enjoy their hard-earned win. The Saga had faced the dangers of the deep sea, and thanks to the skill and hard work of its crew, it had come out on top. They had proven that even when the odds were against them, they could pull together, fight through the toughest conditions, and come out victorious. After securing their catch, Captain Keith and the Wizard prepared to face the Bering Sea's massive waves. Against the gale. Out on the rough waters of the Bering Sea, the Wizard faced huge waves nearly 30 feet high and powerful winds blowing at 40 knots. Captain Keith, a seasoned fisherman, knew the dangers, but also understood the rewards of taking on such harsh conditions. With the fishing season in full swing, every decision he made could make or break their catch of crabs, which was crucial for meeting their quotas and turning a profit. The Wizard, a strong and sturdy boat, had to push through the growing waves, which were already 25 feet high. Captain Keith had a daring plan to bring up their crab pots, even with the challenging conditions. He aimed to position the boat just right, hoping that by aligning with the weather, they could make a successful haul. His idea was to use the weather to their advantage. He planned to position the boat with the wind hitting the port side, allowing the boat to drift sideways along the line of pots. The strong wind would push them from one pot to the next, speeding up the process and reducing the need to fight against the rough waves. To keep everyone safe and the operation running smoothly, Keith turned the Wizard at a right angle to the wind. The port side of the boat acted like a shield against the crashing waves and also caught the wind like a sail. This allowed the boat to drift along the line of pots while the crew worked hard to pull them in, somewhat protected from the worst of the weather. But this wasn't the toughest part yet. As the Wizard neared the first pot, the tension on deck grew. Captain Keith had to give up some control of the boat to the wind, trusting the strong gusts from the south to guide them toward their goal. This wasn't your average crab fishing. It was a tricky and strategic move that needed a deep understanding of how the sea worked and a willingness to work with the ocean's unpredictable nature. The crew stayed alert, calling out to each other with words of encouragement and caution. The sea, while it could provide, was also a powerful force, constantly reminding them who was really in charge with every wave that smashed against the side of the Wizard. When they managed to pull in the first pot, a wave of cheers spread across the deck. The pot was full and their spirits lifted with this promising start. Captain Keith quickly directed the crew to move to the next pot, eager to build on their initial success. The operation continued, and it was a careful balance of skill, timing, and a little bit of luck. As the Wizard moved from one pot to the next, the crew had to act fast and be precise. Each pot they pulled in got them closer to their goal, but also closer to the risks that come with such high seas. But then things got even worse. Captain Keith kept a close watch on the weather, noticing that it was going from bad to worse. The waves grew taller and the wind became more unpredictable, pushing the crew and the boat to their limits. He called out to remind the crew to be careful, especially with the boat's blind spots, to prepare them for any sudden changes or tilts. As the Bering Sea grew wilder, the crew of the Wizard faced towering waves that kept getting bigger, from 15 to 20 and now 30-foot giants coming in one after another. Captain Keith and his crew were not moving fast in hauling their crab pots, but they were making steady progress, bringing in a few hundred crabs at a time. They were battling rough weather while trying to reach a big goal, to pull up 140 crab pots that had been sitting in the water for over 30 hours. As the wind shifted, it gave them a small break, allowing Keith to pull in more pots despite the rough sea. Each line of pots was set up to face the bad weather head-on, giving them the best chance for a good catch, even in these tough conditions. Captain Keith decided to keep the wind on the side of the boat, which meant that the crew would be taking wave after wave right in their work area. The clock was ticking. They had to bring in the pots before the storm got even worse. Keith knew that if they didn't act now, they might not get another chance for a long time. With determination, he drove the boat straight into the storm, urging his crew to stay focused. But this wasn't the worst part. As they maneuvered the boat, the deck was a mess of chaos. The sea showed no mercy, hitting the crew with freezing sprays and sudden waves that made it hard to even see the pots they needed to find. "Where did my pot disappear to?" became a common question as the crew struggled to spot their gear in the stormy waters. Then a huge wave appeared in front of them and Keith quickly shouted for everyone to hold on. The wave crashed over the deck, drenching everyone and everything in its path. It was a sharp reminder of just how powerful and unpredictable the ocean could be. Despite all this, the crew managed to bring in several pots, but the joy of their small success was dampened by the worsening conditions. They were pushing their limits. Snow squalls began to reduce visibility even further. Keith realized that it was becoming too dangerous to continue. Keith made the call. It was time to stop. The waves were just too big, and the snow made it nearly impossible to see. "This little rodeo just came to a close," he said, knowing they could not risk the safety of the crew any longer. As they turned toward safer waters, Keith thought about the day's efforts. They were fortunate to have brought in what they did without any major accidents. The sea had shown its power, and for now, they had to respect that. Keith hoped the storm would pass soon so they could get back to fishing, but his main concern was finding a safer path for the Wizard. As they navigated to safer waters, Keith pondered the risks they faced. Was it worth challenging the wrath of the sea for the catch? Like, comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping tales from the Bering Sea.